Welcome to this week's edition of Black Authors Matter TV, where we interview the latest movers and shakers in the African American literary community. You'll meet some old friends, discover new ones, and stay abreast of the latest book developments around the country and even the world. So sit back and relax for the next 2 hours with Black Authors Matter TV co-hosts Gwen Richardson and Dr. Rhonda Lawson.
Good evening. It is July 11th, and you have reached Black Authors Matter TV. I'm Gwen Richardson, your host for tonight, and my co-host had to work late at work, so she will be joining us later on this evening. We missed you all last week. We didn't have the show, and we're happy to have you all back again with us this week. So before we bring on our first guest, who is in the, and I'll have to do double duty because Rhonda normally does some of the things that she does a lot of the back end. So before we bring on our first guest, I do want to make a few announcements. And first of all, the National Black Book Festival is rapidly approaching. It's only about 3.5 months away. It's amazing how quickly the time flies. And the vendor space now is at 89% sold. So if you want to get a participating author vendor spot, you need to act on it very soon. Next, we have our book club kickback. Our next one is September 5th with Victoria Christopher Murray and her new book, The First Ladies. It came out June 27th. So get your copy, read it. If you're in a book club, make sure we sent you the email. Make sure you're on our list so you can be a part of the book club kickback. If you're not on our list, just email us and we'll add you to the list. So finally, the finalists for the Black Authors Matter Children's Book Awards will be announced on this show August 15th. So those of you who submitted your books, the judges have met and with some excellent projects submitted, and we're excited about it. So we have an amazing lineup again tonight, and we bring on our first guest, and the name on the list is not the same name as the guest, but I'm hoping that the guest is on camera. So we'll see. Our first guest is Victor Luckerson. And let's see if he comes. There he is coming on camera. I wasn't sure because the name was different. So I wanted to make sure it was you. And so if you could unmute your mic, then we'll be able to hear you. And I want to welcome you to Black Authors Matter TV.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
You're welcome. And we have a copy of your book, Built from the Fire.
Nice.
And the subhead is The Epic Story of Tulsa's Greenwood District, America's Black Wall Street. And at the end of the interview, we're going to be giving the book away to one of our viewers. We always do it based on trivia about the book.
Okay.
So we're doing that. And so your bio says you're based in Tulsa. Are you a native of Tulsa?
No, I actually moved to Tulsa in 2019 specifically to work on this story. You know, I had known a little bit about Greenwood and the race massacre before moving here, but my real interest was in sort of the Black Wall Street legacy, that story about entrepreneurship, solidarity, community in this place. And I really moved here because I wanted to tell the story of these folks here, you know, and I thought it was important to tell the story in an authentic way by really spending time here. So I was living in Atlanta before this project, but in 2019, I quit my job, packed up my life. I made a Black country music playlist to get in the vibe of the Wild West, and I drove west to Tulsa. And I've been living just near Greenwood. I actually live right near Greenwood right now. And so I've been here for about 3.5 years. The book finally has come out, and it's been such a rewarding experience to have it come out while I'm surrounded by all of these folks that I've been interviewing and getting to know so well over the last 3 years.
Well, the book is definitely hefty, and you put a lot of work into this book. I wanted to show people. And you have tons of footnotes in here.
Oh
So
yeah, yeah.
now did you have a foundation of research already done before you moved to Tulsa, or did you hit the ground running once you got there?
So I had done some research before. This whole story started for me actually 5 years ago. In 2018, I actually visited Tulsa for the first time on the anniversary of the race massacre. That was the 97th anniversary. And so that was before the Watchmen TV show had come out, of Lovecraft Country. It was before President Trump and President Biden had visited Tulsa. And so it still wasn't something that every American was aware of. And I actually remember that very first time I came to Greenwood, I had all these visions in my head about Black Wall Street and the success of the community and the entrepreneurship. But what I found when I came actually was that there were more folks in the neighborhood concerned about going to a baseball game. A baseball stadium was built in Greenwood in 2010 to the opposition of a lot of the Black folks in this community. And so I remember the very first time I was here, there was a vigil going on for massacre victims, folks who had been murdered in 1921. And there were maybe about 30 people at this vigil, but there were literally hundreds of other people in the neighborhood going to this baseball stadium that's been built in the middle of Greenwood. And that really didn't sit right with me. And that was really one of my motivations to go further than just writing one article about this, but develop it into a whole book so that this legacy could really be, cherished and captured forever. I think that's something this book can hopefully accomplish. And that's really special.
Well, I don't know how many books have been written on this topic. I know there's been a lot of articles and mentions, but I don't know if there's another body of work this thorough that actually took the time to go talk to residents and interview people. Now, there's a person in here, Ed Goodwin, who his parents are from Greenwood, I believe, and he seems to be a lot of the center of the dialogue, the narrative, for the story. So you made it human by pulling in Mr. Goodwin and kind of centering the narrative around him.
Yeah, one of my goals with this project was to make sure that it was centered on people and centered on families. I really wanted it to be a human story. And so actually the very first time I came here, if you're on Greenwood Avenue today, like I said, there's this baseball stadium in the neighborhood. There's a lot of luxury high rises with mostly white residents. But there's also this old auto garage right there on the block that has Oklahoma Eagle written on the top of it as the nameplate. And so that's the Black newspaper that's in Greenwood that's been in the neighborhood for actually 100 years. And the very first time I came to the neighborhood, I was able to meet Jim Goodwin. Jim is Ed's son. He's an 83-year-old attorney who's in Greenwood, lived here his whole life. And so it was Jim actually was able to sort of unfurl for me this amazing family story that they have. So when Jim's father, Ed, was a little boy, he grew up in Water Valley, Mississippi, under the boot of Jim Crow. In Water Valley, if a white man was walking down the street and a Black man approached him, the Black man was expected to scurry into the gutter. And so, Ed didn't want to put up with that, neither did his parents. And so the family decided to move to Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1914, which was then known as the Eden of the West. This was a time period when Black folks all across the Deep South were streaming into Oklahoma, trying to find a better life for themselves. And the Goodwins were one of those families. And so, Jim was able to tell me this story about how they came here in 1914, how Ed had been a high school senior actually during the race massacre in 1921. He was literally going to graduate just days after the event. And then, his home, his church, his world was completely destroyed during that event. But for me, one reason I really wanted to focus so much on the Goodwins, as you point out, is because they're able to stay in this community. They're able to rebuild their lives, help their neighbors rebuild, and really sort of keep fighting for justice here over the course of the next 100 years. And so, Ed was a pretty interesting person to follow. I really liked how he was an entrepreneur in a lot of different kinds of ways. He owned a shoe store on Greenwood Avenue. He sold fruit. He was also involved in the numbers. Some folks listening might know about numbers, gambling enterprises from back in the day. And so he was involved in that too. I actually found it in my research. I was kind of surprised to find that out about Ed in my research. But then I discovered from my mom that my grandfather did the same thing actually in Alabama. He was something of a hustler. And so I think a lot of Black folks actually have that kind of legacy in their backgrounds, because there really was no normal route to the middle class for Black people in the Jim Crow era. And so Ed was really a great
even
person.
in the North, they were doing that too. Because I just finished watching the 3rd season of Godfather of Harlem, and he ran numbers. So in the storyline, it's a good series if you've never watched it. It's worth watching. Especially from a historical standpoint. But but go ahead. Yeah, no, the whole numbers thing. I don't know when it ended. Maybe when the lotteries when the states started doing lotteries, they didn't need the numbers anymore. But that was for decades. That was a major source of well, it was like under what do I want to call it? The gangs and the people who ran the neighborhoods, they would be running numbers, and sometimes they'd be doing drugs, or they'd be selling drugs, or they'd be that would be part of it. But the running numbers was the more sanitized of the three, and people would I think they printed the numbers in the newspapers. Whatever the results were, or the number was based on something that was printed in the newspaper. It might have been a score of a game or something. I read a little background on just that whole era and the whole culture of running numbers. But that's somebody might need to write a book about that.
I wanted to at least include a little bit about that in my book, because what I learned in my research is that the numbers was huge in Greenwood in 30s, 40s, and 50s. And what's kind of interesting about it too is that you think about this in 1930s, right? The Great Depression's unfolding, and Black folks are getting almost no help from the New Deal. Black people were excluded from a lot of those New Deal programs, didn't get what they deserve from the federal government. And so the numbers actually become this alternate economy where you had, young Black men could get jobs, running the numbers, handing out the policy slips and all that kind of stuff. And then a lot of the entrepreneurs who were in the numbers, like Mr. Goodwin, also had, upstanding businesses too, like the newspaper, the baseball team in Greenwood was owned by somebody else who ran the numbers. And so I just thought that dynamic of these sort of like official businesses and sort of the illicit businesses kind of coinciding, that was just what the world was back then, And so I really wanted to capture something that felt real and authentic in my book by really diving into that.
Okay. Well, the illegal and legal businesses, I think have always coexisted, just in terms of having a way to appear to be legal and to turn your money so you can actually spend it. They had to have a way to clean money, or whatever they called it. So they would have a legitimate business to do that with.
And in the case of the numbers too, when you actually think about what the game is that you're a person living in Greenwood. Every day you get to pick 3 numbers, one between 1 and 56, and hope that they hit. That's just the lottery. So it was illegal and it was criminalized and demonized. But then when the federal government steps in and says we want to make money off of this, now it's okay. And
or the state governments. Just I think every state has one now. Most of them anyway. And they all say the money is supposed to go to help education because that's politically palpable, but the education system has not improved. All these lotteries, children still can't read. So I don't know what they're spending it on as far as education is concerned, but they all say it's going toward education because they know politically it'll be palatable for people. How can you be against education? And so that's how they've been able to sell it to the public. So you are a journalist by profession.
That's correct.
And so this is impressive. I especially since you didn't take 10 years to write it. You really put a lot of effort and work into putting all this together. What surprised you about this project when you got there and you started interviewing people and putting it together? Did you encounter any surprises?
Yeah, I mean, I think that sometimes I find very surprising things in very mundane documents. For example, I spent a lot of time at the college in Greenwood where they have a big race massacre archive. And one of the documents was this Red Cross report that was released right after the race massacre. So during that event, when Greenwood was destroyed, most white institutions were not very helpful at all, but the Red Cross actually was helpful. They like delivered aid in the community. They even helped to sort of stop efforts to take the Black folks' land. And they issued a report that really said in detail everything they did and everything that they could document statistics wise about what happened. So I'm looking through this report one day in the library, and it's telling me that 1,256 homes were destroyed in Greenwood, thousands of meals were distributed to refugees. But it also listed information about fatalities, number of people injured, number of people killed. And in this document, it said that there were actually 8 stillborn babies during the race massacre. And so I just remember finding that information just one random day in the library and having to sit with that alone in the quiet, really try to process that. And so that was and that's in the book, I made sure to highlight that in the book in a way that it would be impactful, the way it impacted me when I heard it. And so I think it's really important that kind of horrific fact really illustrates that Greenwood lost its past during the race massacre, but it also lost its future. We don't know what Greenwood would have been if not for that attack. And so I think it's always important to remember the weight of what we're discussing when we talk about Greenwood and the race massacre.
Yeah, while you were talking, I was sitting here thinking, some people who are watching and who will watch this video later may not even know what the Tulsa massacre is. So maybe we should have started with that, but just give us an encapsulation of the Tulsa massacre, when it was, what happened, what was going before, just like a encapsulation of
Sure,
it.
sure. So like I said, families like the Goodwins moved to Oklahoma because it was seen as a potential Black utopia, a place where Black folks could finally be free. But that's not really what happened. In Oklahoma, the very first law passed when Oklahoma became a state, segregated train cars. They literally imported Jim Crow from the Deep South to this new state. And so from there was a lot of racism in Oklahoma. There was a lot of antagonism towards Black success in Oklahoma. But there's also still a very independent and sometimes militant spirit among Black people. I think about in Tulsa, the Black newspaper, the Tulsa Star, they would have a different slogan on the front page every single week. And one week the slogan was, "You push me, I'll push you." That was the mentality of Greenwood that people need to understand. So that's kind of what's going on. You have these very virulent white racists in Oklahoma. We also have these very proud Black folks who are going to defend themselves and their people, no matter what. So with that kind of stew going on May 30th, 1921, a Black shoeshine boy named Dick Rowland was working in downtown Tulsa, stepped on an elevator with a white attendant named Sarah Page. The elevator doors closed. Dick Rowland steps on her foot, or maybe grabs her arm by accident. No one really knows what happened, but Sarah Page screamed, and the white newspaper in Tulsa basically wrote it up as a attempted rape. That's what the story was after this incident happens. And so this white article comes out saying that this man attempted to rape Sarah Page. He's arrested and put in the county jail in Tulsa. And because both sides of town are getting whipped up in kind of a frenzy, right? So on the white side part of town, people are thinking that this guy attempted to rape this white woman, they're going to lynch him for it. On the Black side of town, people are thinking that because of this false charge, this guy's at risk of being killed and they need to go defend him. And so on the night of May 31st, 1921, everyone gathers around the courthouse where Dick Rowland's being kept. A lot of white people who were going to attempt to lynch him, and a lot of Black folks who are actually soldiers from World War I came to defend him. 2 men are arguing over a gun. A gunshot goes off. All hell breaks loose is one of the most famous quotes from that event. And so you have a lot of chaos in downtown Tulsa that night. And then the next morning, on June 1st, 1921, essentially as retaliation against Black people for attempting to defend Dick Rowland, daring to sort of, have a shootout in downtown Tulsa the night before, white Tulsa systematically burned and destroyed all of Greenwood. They would go into people's homes, gather up all the bedding and material, put it in the middle of the house, douse it in kerosene and light a match. They did this with hundreds of buildings across the community. They also used airplanes to drop incendiary devices on the neighborhood. And it was really ultimately the greatest act of racial violence in the history of the United States. And one of the most vicious attacks that's really been done in the whole world against an ethnic group. For a long time, what happened in Tulsa was called the race riot until about the last, let's say, 5 to 7 years. Now it's often called a race massacre, but another word to use for it could be a pogrom, which is a specific ethnic cleansing of a specific group. That actually might be the most accurate word for what happened. So, it was very vicious and it was very savage. And really the motivation for it was trying to punish these Black people and put them back in their place because they had dared to go defend one of their own when he was going to be lynched for a false rape accusation.
Yeah, it's now the reason it's called Black Wall Street is because there were a lot of businesses that were Black owned and it was a thriving community with entrepreneurship before it was completely destroyed. So tell us some of the kinds of businesses that they had in Greenwood.
Oh yeah, they're all kinds, you know what I mean? Everything from really fancy hotels to like seedy corner dives. You had one story I like a lot is that there was a Tulsa Color School of Music where you can learn classical music. And there was also like a ragtime bar where they were playing ragtime. And the classical music guy hated the ragtime guy. And so I love that idea about these folks in the community having different perspectives on what it means to be Black. One of my favorite entrepreneurs to learn about actually was Lula Williams, who was one of the most prominent women of the era. She actually owned the Dreamland Theater. I discovered in my research, actually, like often Lula and her husband John are sort of portrayed as this power couple who owned everything together, or even sometimes that John himself ran things and Lula was helping him. But what I found out was actually the opposite. Lula ran the theater and John was helping her. And I was able to find some documents that even proved that she went to the courthouse and signed an affidavit that said, I, Lula Williams, own at the movie theater the seats, the projector, the popcorn machine. My husband doesn't own any of that. She went to the courthouse to make that very, very clear. And so I love that story about her independence and that she was able to create such an iconic space. You know what I mean? If people have watched the Watchmen TV show or Lovecraft Country, the Dreamland is depicted in both of those shows. And so she really honestly had the most iconic of the Greenwood businesses. And she made it really clear that she owned it for herself. So I just love that about her spirit.
Well, it's really just mind-numbing what happens to all those people. And was there ever any, and I meant to look it up before the show, but I didn't get a chance to. Has there ever been any kind of compensation or reparations for the people of Greenwood?
No, there is not. So just to take, for example, Lula Williams, her Dreamland was burned to the ground during the race massacre, and she filed a lawsuit. She tried to get her insurance claims met. She had insurance out on those buildings in case they burned down, but the insurance companies claimed that they weren't going to pay her because it had been destroyed in a quote unquote riot. And so they had an exclusion clause that made it so she couldn't get paid. She ends up suing the insurance company, as in many other Greenwood residents, and she never got any money for that. No one at that time got any money, and all those cases were dismissed on the very same day, actually in 1937, for reasons we don't know. Fast forward about 80 years, Lula's daughter and Ed Goodwin's wife actually also filed a second round of lawsuits. So we have race massacre survivors who are 70, 80 years old, filing lawsuits saying, hey, we still deserve justice for this thing that happened a long time ago. This case went all the way up to the US Supreme Court. But what's really tragic about it is that because Lula and others have filed those cases in the 1920s, the courts in the 2000s said, oh, y'all have already exceeded the statute of limitations. So the injustice of 1920s actually ended up undermining the case in the year 2000. So I think shows a very deep flaw in the way our justice system operates. And actually, just this past Friday, there's been a third effort to secure justice. There are 3 living race massacre survivors right now. They're all more than 100 years old, and they've been having a lawsuit kicking through the courts for the last about 3 years. And the judge actually just dismissed the case this past Friday. And so that's been a very huge gut punch to people here in Tulsa and in Greenwood, understanding that, it's literally been 102 years. And on 3 different occasions, the justice system has failed to compensate people for what anyone could see was wrong. And savage. And so I think, actually, I was at a press conference yesterday where the attorneys for the case were talking about their next steps. They're planning to actually appeal this case up to the state Supreme Court. There's also a lot of other efforts going on in Greenwood right now seeking reparations or restoration in various forms. So it's still very much a very alive story, this pursuit of justice. But and sort of whenever folks here have gone to the courts, they have been denied every single time. And I think that's truly a tragedy. And it really speaks more poorly on the way our justice system works than it does on these folks who've been trying to take the right steps to get what they deserve.
Yeah, that statute of limitations issue, murder doesn't have a statute.
Right.
But normally murder is brought by the state, not an individual. You run into these legal, it's really like legal out clauses that laws are written for the powerful and not for the powerless, because any reasonable person would say that people should have been compensated, and they shouldn't be punished because the system would not compensate them at the time that was within the statute. It's case 22. The statute would not, the justice system would not compensate them during that time. I don't know what the statute is on losing property, but it might be 10 years or something like that. I don't know what it is, but
no, it was just
wouldn't work for them.
Yeah, it's an explicitly, at the time of the race massacre, it was an explicitly racist system. I found in my research that several of the judges in Tulsa were literally in the Ku Klux Klan. And these are the people deciding the outcome of these cases. And so to have that be, factual information about the dynamics of Tulsa in the 1920s, and then to come back 80 years later and say, actually, we're gonna uphold those cases as valuable and correct. To your point, any sort of reasonable person can see that doesn't make any sense.
Right. So you also reported on the Rosewood massacre in Florida, which took place 2 years after that in 1923. So I know that there are parallels in that a Black man was accused of attacking a white woman or touching a white woman or looking at a white woman wrong. So many men have died because of an accusation by a white woman. This is factually true. That's what happened to Emmett Till, and that was 30 years later. So in our final couple of minutes, what parallels do you see with Rosewood and Greenwood? And it's ironic, their names are both ended with wood. That's like, wow, what a coincidence.
I'm glad you brought up Rosewood, because I think it's really important for people to understand that what happened in Tulsa wasn't an outlier. It was really emblematic of that era. There were actually similar race massacres and destructions of Black communities all across the United States. Dozens of these things happened between about 1917 or so and 1923 when Rosewood was. In fact, there were so many in 1919, that year became called the Red Summer, denoting the amount of blood that was spilled in these race massacres. I think the Rosewood case in particular, I found it interesting because there are definitely parallels. Rosewood was a prosperous Black community. As you said, a false accusation of sexual assault is sort of what has sparked everything. But I found it interesting because in Rosewood's case, those folks actually got reparations decades later. So around the same time that Greenwood survivors were fighting for reparations around the year 2000, around that same time,
right,
Rosewood survivors were granted reparations by the Florida State Legislature. So part of my story that I wrote, it was not only about excavating that history of the massacre, but also the history of that legal case and how they were able to advocate for themselves. I think it's so important we discuss reparations to make sure that, I think a lot of times people think of reparations as being pie in the sky or impractical, or how could it ever work? That's often a question that's used, I think, to undermine the agenda. And I really wanted to walk through, in Florida, they figured out how to make it work. They found the people, they allocated a certain amount of money, they went through all the bureaucracy, and they found a way to give those folks some money. What I really liked about that story I wrote actually is that I was able to meet with some of the descendants of the Rosewood survivors, and one family still lives in the house their parents were able to buy with the reparations money. And so we talk a lot about generational wealth and how that's been robbed of Black people. Reparations is a way to restore that generational wealth. You know, if it happened in Rosewood, it can happen in Tulsa, it can happen for so many other scenarios. So I think it's always important to focus on what are those success stories we have in this struggle too.
Well, we're at the end of our time. We really appreciate you coming on and telling us about your book. I'm going to hold it up again, Built from the Fire. And
Oh yeah, I got a copy too. So we
you
match
got a copy too. It's an amazing piece of work. And what I want to do, I have a trivia question. Let me post it if I can, or I might not be able to post it. See, I know I have a co-host who normally does the posting, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to just say what the question is, and then Rhonda can post it when she comes on later on. So here's the question, and you answered it earlier when you were talking, but people may have not heard it or may not have been listening intently. So here's the question. Ed Goodwin is central to Tulsa's history in Victor's book, in your book. So Goodwin purchased a newspaper. What was the name of the newspaper? So for all of our viewers, the first one to answer that question, what was the name of the newspaper? You win your copy. This is not an advanced reading copy. This is the actual book.
It's a real deal, yeah.
It's a real deal. So thank you again, Victor, for coming on, and congratulations on writing such an amazing, substantial book.
Thank you so much, Glenn. I really appreciate it. This has been so lovely, and I'm so glad that y'all are doing this to give so many Black authors a platform. It's really important work.
Well, thank you. We love doing it.
Great.
So you have a great evening.
All right, you as well. Bye now.
Okay, bye-bye. All right, so that was about Tulsa, Oklahoma, and the Greenwood massacres. So we are bringing on our next guest, and our next guest is a retired military, I don't know if she's an officer, but I'm gonna say she's an officer. She's an author, a retired teacher, and retired from the military. And she has a children's book, but she has other books as well, but she's going to talk about her children's book. The name of the book is Willie's Friends and Foes. And the author's name is Terri Watts. So we welcome Terri Watts to Black Authors Matter TV. And while she's coming on screen, we had two people answer the question about the newspaper for the previous book. And I'm probably going to have to wait till after the show to figure out which one answered first, because they came in back to back. The answer is the Oklahoma Eagle, and it was answered by Mary Evans and Janice Kearney, but I need to see who actually answered first, and then whichever one wins the book. So Terri Watts, welcome to Black Authors Matter TV. We just need you to unmute your mic so we can hear you. And there you go.
Okay. I was listening to that wonderful interview by Victor. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, he put a lot of work in this book. I'm amazed at how much
did.
work was done in a relatively short period of time. So Terri, now was I correct that you are a retired military officer?
No, non-commissioned officer.
Non-commissioned officer. Okay, I want to get it right.
Yes.
Okay, well, and because that's an important thing. How long were you in the military?
I served for 20 years.
In which branch?
Army.
Army, okay. Well, Rhonda, my co-host, is also retired from the Army. So
yeah,
if she comes on, she had to work late today. She may be on before the end of this interview, but she still works for the government, but in a different capacity.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So you, in your bio, you talk about how you had always wanted to write a book, and then you got your master's degree in education or school administration, and then you became ill, and after that you retired in education, and then after that you wrote several books. So sometimes an illness can lead to other things.
Yes, it can. Yes,
So
it
tell us
can.
about that period when you retired and then you thought you were moving on to something else and then you became ill.
I was so extremely excited about becoming an assistant principal that I went to school and was trying to work at the same time. And I kept getting sick off and on. And so one night I had to go to the emergency room. And I remember the doctor telling me, you're gonna have to take something off your plate. And I looked at my husband and I'm like, but I want to become an assistant principal. And but unfortunately, on April the 12th, 2012, I suffered from a mini stroke. And then I just became very depressed, and I'm like, oh God, what am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? I went to school and I desperately wanted to become an assistant principal, but, and I could hear the Lord speak to me, and he said, well, when you got your master's degree, didn't you do a lot of writing? And I was like, yes, Lord. So I remember getting up at 1 o'clock in the morning and just start writing on my first book.
Okay, one of those in the middle of the night. You know, as a writer, sometimes you get those inspirations in the middle of the night, or thoughts or ideas, or a scene or a quote will come to you. And I'm an author too, so I keep sticky notes everywhere. And when something comes to me, I write it down, because sometimes my phone's not handy or I'm not at my laptop. I might be anywhere. So everywhere where I sit in my home, I have a sticky notepad everywhere, and so I can write things down, because sometimes I'll think about changing a scene that I've already written. Right now I'm working on a sequel to a novel I did, and so most of my writing is nonfiction, but fiction is different. So anyway, now you have a children's book that you want to talk about called Willie's Friends and Foes.
Yes.
But when you finish telling us about that, I wanted you to tell us about some of your other books as well. So tell us about Willie's Friends and Foes and show us the cover.
Okay, this is Willie's Friends and Foes.
Okay.
Can you see it?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And first I wrote, where is Willie? And some friends of mine and fans that always purchase my books, they said, Terri, you need to write a sequel on a series on Willie. We would like to see him grow up and see what kind of young man he became. So in Willie's Friends and Foes, he's being bullied and on social media. And he did not know how to handle that. And as when I was an assistant principal intern, I remember this young lady coming up to me. It was during bus duty time. And she says, Miss Watts, would you please just stand with me, because I was told that some students are gonna come and beat me up. And I'm like, oh my God, but the principal told me I need to be here. But this young lady was so adamant about me staying with her so those kids wouldn't beat her up. And I just left my post and stood there. And sure enough, the students come running down the sidewalk to attack her. And I had to call on the radio for the SRO. And so I wanted to infiltrate that information into this book, Willie's Friends and Foes. And the way that she told me about her incident, I wanted to make it clear to students that it's okay to tell someone, any staff member that you can trust, that you're being bullied. Don't just try to take it on alone. And so that's why I wanted that. That's what gave me the drive to write about him being bullied on social media.
Okay. Yeah, bullying is not new as far as a concept, but
No.
the new part is that it's leading children to commit suicide.
Yes,
Because we had
yes,
bullies
it
when
is.
I was growing up. Nobody committed suicide. You just either lived with it or hope for the best. I was lucky whenever somebody bullied me because I was always smaller than all the other kids. And
Oh,
but a big person would always come to my defense. So whenever
yeah,
somebody said they were going to beat me up, a big person would just come. It was just God. It was angels because I've never been in
yeah.
a physical fight in my life. I wouldn't. It's just I'm too small. You know, I was very small as a kid. I was always a
Wow.
small person. So to me, if you were going to bully me, you were just a real bully. You know, because you knew I couldn't win. You know what I mean? But now
Yeah.
children are. It's because of the social media and the fact that the bullying doesn't just stay in your neighborhood or on your block, it goes all over, and some children feel like they can't live with it. And that's the real tragic part of bullying today.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
And it was good that you were able to come to the defense of that young lady. Now, what grade level was this? Was it middle school?
This was in high school.
High
This
school?
was
Okay.
in high school.
Okay.
And the kids that tried to beat her up, they were already expelled from the school. They just came
Oh.
on campus and she kept getting information from social media that she's gonna get beat up after school. And she, I guess I gained her trust, and she came to me, and I just left my post. I said, I deal with the principal later. But that girl she's very upset. And I was glad and thankful that she came to me because we stopped a huge issue there.
Who is Willie?
Willie is a little boy who he first started struggling in school, in elementary school. He couldn't read. And I like to take parts of my story to put into my books. I love to pull in a lot of the true things that have happened in my life. At one time, I could not read. And so my mother got a tutor for me. And I used Willie to create that story. And I showed how just because you have a learning disability, it doesn't mean that that's the end of the road for you. It means that you just learn differently from others. And so I created Willie to show that, okay, hey, he has a reading problem, but he can make it. And I always had a silver lining at the end of the story. So he became a great reader at the end, and he ended up helping other students in the story.
Okay, so is Willie named after anybody, or did you just kind of grab that name out of the air?
I like that question. I don't know. Sometimes I just lay down and I think of some names, and I'm like, where did I get this name from? So he just popped up. Willie just popped up.
Yeah, some names do pop up, but my husband's name is Willie. That's why I asked.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And that's not his nickname. You know, some people
wow.
will automatically say William.
William, yeah.
That's not his name. His name is Willie because he was named after his father. So,
okay.
But yeah, that's his name. So that's what made me think about it. So, what message do you want adults and children to get from your series about Willie? And then what do you have another book coming after the Friends and Foes book about Willie in the series?
Okay, so with the Willie series, what message that I want them to get is I want students to feel free to talk to staff members, find a staff member or someone at your church your parents, even grandparents that you can trust, and ask for help. Don't struggle through this alone, because I've seen a lot as a special ed teacher. When I taught special ed, I saw a lot of students struggle seemingly alone, and they wouldn't ask for help. But that's mostly the strong message. And with the Willie's Friends and Foes, I would like for for students to ensure that when they see someone being bullied, do not stand by and watch, but pitch in and help. Try to de-escalate the situation if possible. Even if you could just step away and alert another adult, do that for that student. The students, I feel strongly believe that they need to step up for each other. And that would kind of stop a lot of the bullying, but we can't do anything really about the social media. And in this book, Willie desperately wanted to get on social media, but his mother did not want him to. And because he became very smart, the students picked on him. That's another message I would like to send. If you are highly intelligent, go for it. Do not dilute your intellect just to make other people feel good about themselves. Strive on and get your education.
That's really good advice in today's environment, even for adults. Go for it. Don't hide your intellect or your abilities or your if your knowledge is superior, put it out there.
That's right.
Because that's a way for you to get ahead, and it helps you feel good about yourself. In this world that we're in, we're always competing. It can be like soft competition at work, but we're competing with other people. We're being measured against what other people do. And so if we are good at something, don't hide your light under a bushel. Put it out there and go for it, like you said.
That's right.
So what are some of your other book titles that you've done? Because you said you have written 8 books, I think. Is it 8? And you're working on number
8.
9.
Yeah, I'm working on number 9, but it's not because I remember you asked me, I think you asked me, was it gonna be Willie's next step in life?
Yes.
But I had started with another book called Valerie's Heart.
Okay.
And so Heart.
Valerie's
Valerie's
Heart.
Heart.
Okay.
Yes, I'm writing on that now as we speak. I wanna, if I could, talk about this book, Doghouse.
Okay.
Doghouse.
Okay.
This book is, I'm a domestic violence survivor. And so I wrote this book to show people that, again, we do not have to endure someone mistreating us, hitting us. And before this book was published, lo and behold, I was sitting on the beach and I got a phone call. The book was in the publication phase, and I received a phone call. Such terrible news. I lost my niece to domestic violence. And so I was glad when this came out, so women can read it and take advantage of when other people have gone through certain things, to kind of give you guidelines, because there's so many women out there that think they have to stay, and you do not have to stay. There are ways out.
Yeah, that is domestic violence is challenging. It's a challenging topic. A lot of times women feel trapped, and I'll just say women because I've heard that there are men that are dealing with domestic violence, but I've never met one I'm not saying they don't exist. I'm sure they do, but I would probably say 95% of the people that are victims are going to be females.
Yes.
And a lot of times, now I tell young girls, if you're dating somebody, or old girls, young or old, it doesn't matter. If he puts his hands on you once, walk away.
That's exactly right.
Because he's an abuser. He's a hitter, and it's not going to get any better. It's not a one-off. Abusers they don't just do it once and then quit. That's part of that's a personality flaw, and you need to walk away while you can. So now, what's the significance of the title Doghouse? Is somebody in the doghouse? I love talking about book titles because
I so love
there's a thought process when you do a title for a book. There's a thought process that goes with it. So, and when I say you, I mean a person, because I have 14 books, and I'm working on number 15. So there's a thought process with every book title.
Yes. I so love your questions. I mean, they are so on point. So Doghouse, I had my book was I chose Doghouse because little dogs, when they feel that they have done something wrong, they would retreat to a safety place, to a safe place.
Okay.
But in this instance, even though the dogs could retreat and normally be safe, it's sort of like how should I say it? In this instance, you're not safe. You're in a house and you may run to a certain room in your house for safety.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So that's why
I've never been a victim of domestic violence, praise the Lord, but and it doesn't necessarily have to be physical, although we usually think of it in physical terms. But there's psychological abuse that's extremely harmful. And a lot of women are beat down without being touched physically, but they're just beat down in terms of who they are and become. And a lot of times is to keep it, if the woman feels good about herself, she won't stay there. She won't stay in that kind of environment. So a lot of it is a way of keeping with a low self-esteem, so they will stay.
And I did some research because a lot of times, and this happened to me, a lot of times we don't see the red flags, the little small red flags. Like for example, sometimes your partner or your husband or wife or whatever may playfully hit you. And in doing so, if that's painful, that's a red flag.
Yes, that would be.
That is a red flag.
Mm-hmm.
And another one is if they don't want to be around your family, when you try to invite them to your family barbecues or maybe Christmas parties or what have you, and they choose not to go, that's another red flag.
Well, that's true too. And somebody did we've had some comments from people who are watching, and some quite a few comments actually. Oh, okay. So I'm gonna let you know some of them. One person said, if you know you are highly intelligent, go forward. Do not dilute yourself to make other people feel good about themselves. And that's a quote from you. They quoted you on that one. And then Selma Brown said, physical or emotional abuse is unacceptable under any term. And that's true. That is true. Georgette Jackson said, words hurt too. And they do. Words, cruel words are really like a knife stabbing you.
Yes, yes.
So there's and if someone really cares about you, they're not going to do any of those things.
No,
If
they will
somebody
not.
loves you, they're not going to be abusive, and they're not going to be they're not going to say horrible things to you if they love you.
No, they will not.
And a lot of times when they do that, they don't love themselves either.
That's
And
right.
so they strike out at who's closest. Familiarity breeds contempt. So you're the one close when the person feels bad about themselves, and so you end up being the object of that.
Mhm.
So Doghouse is your domestic violence book, and then
Yes.
are the rest of your books children's books, or what are some of your other titles in the 5 minutes we have left?
No, I started out writing memoirs, and I wrote one on when I got a divorce, because it seemed like everybody around me was getting divorces, and so that was my very first book in 2013, and I wanted to shed light that there's hope. All we got to do is trust in God, and He will deliver us. We have to just learn how to depend on Him. And I wrote another one, like a prequel to that book, in my younger years. When we are teenagers and stuff like that, we tend not to want to listen to our parents.
Of
And
course not. Because we know it all. When you're a teenager, you think you know stuff. You don't know anything. You don't know nothing. But you think you know it all, and that your parents are really just old-fashioned or out of touch, or they were just born old.
Yes, yes. And I did not want to hear it. Anything my mother had to say. And so in that book, I wanted to touch on abortion, because at 19, I had an abortion. And I wanted to share with young ladies that, look, the baby is not the sin, it's the act. And if you find yourself in that situation, if at all possible, please keep the baby and let someone adopt, because there are so many women out there who are barren, just wishing they can get pregnant. And had I had the knowledge that I have now, I would have never done that. So I wanted to steer that forward for young ladies. Don't beat yourself up. You made a mistake. If at all possible, have the baby and let someone adopt it. That's my message for that.
Yeah, well, and millions have made that mistake. So you're not alone in
Yes.
having made it, because millions have made that mistake.
Yes.
And you're all right. There are a lot of people who would love to adopt a baby, especially an infant that they could
Yes.
raise.
Yes.
So that's an option that we should hear more about. We don't
Exactly
hear
right.
about that as an option. It's like the default is an abortion, and there's not enough conversation about other things that could be done.
Exactly right.
So we
Yes.
are at the end of our time. So I wanted to make sure that people can get a copy of Willie's Friends and Foes, and your other book about Willie, the
Yes.
Doghouse book, and all of your books. So tell people how they can order a copy of one of your books or all of them.
Well, I have my own website, and it's at www.terribrittwatts.com, or you
Okay.
can go to Amazon. You can order from Walmart, Barnes and Noble. It was so many places that I didn't even know was carrying my books. But I prefer that people order from me, because I will autograph them and put a little note in there. I always write little notes in there to the children. And I want to add that this book, Willie Friends and Foes, on page 72, has questions, and it offers vocabulary words, vocabulary skills, and reading comprehension skills.
Okay, what age is the target age for the book?
It is from grade 4 through 5.
Okay, so it's for elementary school, the higher
Yes.
elementary school grades.
Yes.
So
Yes.
because it does start in elementary school. That's, I mean,
Yes.
bullying starts in
Yes,
elementary
it does.
school. That's where I had my first experience. So
Yeah.
anyway, Terri, congratulations on your books, and thank you so much for being a guest on Black Authors Matter TV.
And thank you guys so much, because this helps us. This really helps us. I had no clue as to how to market my books, and I'm getting ready to go and take advantage of this email I got today from you.
Oh, okay. Well, you also will get a copy of this interview by itself. You're going to get that most likely by Friday, and then you can post your own individual interview on your platforms and your website.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Richardson.
Okay, now I'm not the doctor. Rhonda's the doctor. I tell people always want to make me a doctor. I'm not Dr. Richardson, but I appreciate the love and all that. Dr. Rhonda is the doctor.
Okay, I do apologize, Ms. Richardson.
So thank you so much for being a guest on the show, and continued success to you with your work.
Thank you so much.
Okay, good night.
Good night.
Okay, I'm hoping Rhonda will make it at some point during the show, but she hasn't so far. And so we're going to bring on our next guest. And this guest it's interesting. She's a bookstore owner, but she's also an author. And her bookstore, because as you don't know, we have bookstore owners on the show from time to time, and they're all different. The reason why they open the stores are different. Of course, where they're located is different, but this one is unique in that her books are focused on STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and math. So our guest for this third segment is Jacqueline Sanders-Blackman. Welcome to Black Authors Matter TV.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate everything that you're doing. This is wonderful.
Oh, well, we're happy to have you, and I'm glad we were able to connect so we could get you on the show. I found your espresso bookstore concept to be different, and I wanted to know, first of all, explain to the audience what espresso bookstore focuses on and how long you've been open.
Okay. We kicked off our physical store in February of this year. Espresso books have been in the making for about 5 years. My whole journey has started out with, I've got with this is my first book. This is Smart Sarah and the Magic of Science. And, you know, I started out going, with vendor tables at different events and expos. And every time someone would say, oh, you've got the little girl, do you have a little boy book? I was like, check back with me. I like that. And then came Preston.
Oh,
Sarah
okay.
Preston.
Now, it's
Sarah
Perceptive
Preston.
PJ. Is that one's Perceptive PJ?
Yes.
Okay.
PJ stands for Preston Jr., because they're
Okay.
actually named after my parents, and Perceptive PJ in the making of a mathlete. So his focus is math, hers is science, and they have a whole big family of STEM makers in the family. And so I started that journey about 2018, 2019, and was picking up momentum. People started asking me, do you have something for the babies? 6 months later, I'd have something for the babies. Do you have workbooks? And I started with coloring books. And then COVID hit. And with COVID, all these things that were packed in my trunk and that I was traveling around to now was in my garage. And I started working with some schools and had those opportunities. But when things started to open back up in 22, I no longer had that passion for going on the road with all of my books, and COVID was still kind of floating around a little bit. So that's when the opportunity opened up, and I actually was walking through the particular mall, and I went to ask the mall manager, could I just do a display of my books? I did something to get it in front of people as they're walking through the mall. And I have to say, God saw a bigger picture. I asked for just a display. I got a store. And that really was the catalyst. There wasn't, I didn't go into it initially thinking I was going to open a store, but as the store, I opened it up and started bringing things out of my garage. Then that's when I really saw the true inventory, that I had 28 different books, workbooks, and other types of books. Because during COVID, I'd gotten a lot of questions to build out a curriculum, to help parents, to help engage kids. They saw how disconnected they were from the school curriculum and and saw mine as an alternative or a supplement for the kids. So that was the evolution.
Okay, so Espresso Bookstore is in the Atlanta area, or is it in Atlanta City proper?
It is within the perimeter. Technically, it's right off of that corridor at 75 and 285, right by where the Cobb Galleria. It's in the Cobb Galleria, which is across the street from the Cumberland, and it's also around the Battery. So we've got all the different traffic going on in that area.
Okay, so are all of the books and items in your store STEM focused, or is that like the central part and then you add it to that?
By and large, I do try to focus on STEM, but there are, STEM touches so much. And I think that's what people don't necessarily realize when you talk about science, technology, engineering, art, and math, because within STEM, that's where the STEAM comes into it. You add the A for arts.
Okay.
And that's one of my overall missions is, for example, I have a cookbook in my, list of books that I've written, but that cookbook has STEM woven into it. Because when you're in the kitchen and you're cooking, there's some science going on, you're doing some measuring,
Yeah.
numbers are involved. And so in a way, I use all different types of topics, whether it's sports or fashion, whatever you can think of. But I find those that still incorporate some form of learning in them. And that's really the basis. It's just anything that motivates kids to learn and want to pick up a book.
Well, I'm thinking that your books probably help with people who want to homeschool. Do you get a lot of homeschoolers who
I do.
Their information? I'm thinking it would be perfect for that. What's your background?
I'm actually in the STEM fields. I'm in technology and software engineering. I was a math minor, so I dabbled in all of that. I work right now around pharmaceutical and clinical medical types things. So anything kind of STEM, that it's been woven throughout my career.
That's really great. So when you are thinking about writing something, it sounds like you get a lot of ideas and encouragement about what the market wants from your customers.
I do. It's a constant feedback loop. Their reaction, they have been the ones that have defined what the library of books I have. And I think that's the most important thing, because I created my line of books to solve that problem. Is why were kids, avoiding math or afraid of math or didn't like math? And where math is concerned, then you also get into the sciences and technology and engineering. And what I feel is that if that happens early on, then they've shut down a whole plethora of different career and business and entrepreneur opportunities. And really, it's just that someone hasn't helped them find their style of learning. And so that's one of the things, and that we know that the careers of the future are very much, especially those that are going to provide, wealth and nice income, they're going to be STEM related. But one thing I do want to say is that exposing kids to STEM isn't just about them becoming engineers or technologists. That's not that, I don't expect that. But what I want them to understand is STEM is about problem solving. It's a part of your brain, a critical thinking that you need. So whether you want to go out there and be an artist or a musician or whatever the case may be, you still need your critical thinking for whatever you're doing. And so I want kids to turn off to that early on, because it's like a muscle, your brain. You have to develop the right side as well as the left side so that we want whole brain kids as we raise our kids.
Well, that is so true. I know my husband's grandchildren were being homeschooled, and I was helping them once a week, just going, because they were spending so much time on tablets that when I would come in and help them, I would use old school pen and paper, and we're going to solve problems and think. We're going to use our mind, our brain, the other side of the brain, because a lot of people don't realize if you stay on devices, you're not stimulating the side of your brain that does critical thinking. And his granddaughter would say, when I would be trying to get her to focus on what was on the paper, because I would get workbooks, the kind they sell at you might have some. I have to look at your array of items. But when I would say you need to focus, just think about what the answer is, she would say, my brain hurts. I mean, she was, at the time she was 7, and she meant it, because if you don't use that other side of your brain, it really does hurt when you try to focus on something, because if you want to be constantly stimulated with electronics, that's not using your brain. You need to use your brain to process information, and as you say, to solve problems. Problem solvers are the leaders in society, the people who get the most wealth, have the higher paying jobs. They're solving problems, or they're selling, which is solving a problem too.
Yeah.
If you're in sales, you always have a job. But and if you're a problem solver, you'll always have a job.
Right. And I think that it's also important. There's a couple of things that you mentioned, is that we want to raise problem solvers because we want to be at the table so that we are influencing the way things are being used, even the way computers are being used. Everyone's concerned about artificial intelligence. If we don't have different technologists and engineers in the room while some of these conversations are coming on, first of all, they can't speak up for our community, which usually ends up being kind of the one that gets the short end of the stick, and all these different, when something new comes out. And then, at the same time, to be able to educate the community, because I think that we would trust better if it was coming from someone that looked like us and had similar experiences. So I think that's important. We want to have as many problem solvers, in every arena, just like, we're across every sport. We need to be across every discipline that's out there, speaking up and keeping an eye on what's going on and keeping the community updated about that. So I think that's so important. Then your story about with the grandchildren, one of the things why STEM and homeschooling, they both are really kind of blossoming right now, is homeschooling very much believes in what they call experiential learning, where it's about the experience, it's about the hands-on, and like you said, that using your brain. So even taking your kids in, like I said, if you're cooking in the kitchen, they've got to problem solve. They're watching, they're going through the ingredients and they're going through this formula, and you know, things sometimes go wrong and you've got to compensate for them. They're going through that whole thought process. Building a garden over the summer, that's something else. Get their hands in the dirt. And so that's very much the backbone of homeschooling as well, not just sitting them in front of, you know, books and, you know, just memorizing things so you can take tests. It's about the experience. It's about experimenting. It's about, you know, having a theory and then seeing how it plays out when you practice that, put that to practice.
So how are things going at the store? Your store is fairly new and it's at a mall, so you have some built-in traffic there. So how is that going?
So I'm in a very unique environment where we are attached to a conference center. And one of the things is that a group of principals and teachers just came through in the month of June. And, you know, I right away knew that, you know, they related to what I had. They are taking it back to all the other states. So the store is very much just kind of a place so that people can pick up and take items back to all the other states, because I even see the opportunity where this store will potentially be a franchise, and we'll have them in other states. And I'm even talking with some of the people that came through the store. So this is just the launching pad of something much bigger. But I have to say, I've received so much love. And to your point, we actually have our homeschool conference coming up the 27th and 28th. It's going to be a conference in the Cobb Galleria. So all those people are going to be passing by my store. So I welcome that and look forward to that. So we very much are based on what the different conferences are. Earlier this year, we had the Black College Expo that came to the Cobb Galleria. So the different events that come there is what feeds, which you know, brings me new exposure.
Okay, so it's feature traffic. So it's not necessarily based on shoppers, you know, consumers that shop on the weekend or the evenings or whenever they're there. It's more driven by big organizations that come to town. And a lot of them are education related. So that's really great. That's great to get that kind of opportunity. Now, where did the name Espresso come from?
Espresso is probably because I drink too much coffee. but it was actually a combination of something my husband and I came up together, and we do spend a lot of time, and our initial brainstorming was in a coffee shop. And the thing is that I think about espresso is espresso comes in a lot of different shades and you know, colors. But it also gives you, it's got a lot of energy. It gives you a lot of energy, and just very vibrant. So out of it comes a lot of creativity. So, you know, we embody espresso and we drink it.
Well, I've never tasted espresso, so that's but I've heard that it have a higher caffeine concentration than just regular coffee.
Oh,
I've heard, is it like Red Bull? Is that the one that people drink to get a?
you know what? I go straight for espresso. I've never even had Red Bull, so
Me either.
If Red Bull can keep up with espresso, but espresso, yeah, it is no joke. It is. If not, I'm chewing on espresso beans. That's my. That's how
Oh.
much I love coffee.
Now somebody said, I like how, they like how you came up with the name of the store. I'm looking at some of the comments, and this one says, congratulations. It is an outstanding establishment. So I don't know if there's someone who's been there. Do you carry self-published authors? We had that question come up.
Yes, what we want to do is even open it up to have self-published authors come and do book signings, do events. We definitely want we want it to be an event place as well. And we've sponsored some events. I've done some readings there. I have a story time when my schedule allows, and we want other authors to come and do like a story reading. So please reach out to me if you are an author, especially children's book, especially if it has in some way aligned with a STEM education. And let's talk for sure.
Okay. Now, for your workbooks that you said you created as a response to demand, what do your workbooks cover in terms of the topics? Like the subjects? Do you have math, science, and do you have English? Do you?
Okay, so I'll answer that. I'll start straight off. I don't necessarily have an English per se, but I do have some journals where there are some writing exercises in there. But one of the things I did with my workbooks, instead of making them about STEM and STEAM, I made them about things that kids are interested in. So I have a book on sports. And what I do is I take 38 different sports, some that a lot of kids maybe never even realized was a sport. But what I do is I tell them about that sport. I show them famous historical figures of color that have been in those sports. And out of those 38, I didn't find not one that we hadn't been a part of, including things like fencing, rugby, you name it.
Lacrosse.
Lacrosse,
One of those
absolutely. Yes. And
Golf
so
used to be, but we've crossed that, But go ahead.
No.
Sports.
And
So
then with that, they
sports?
have math problems.
Did you say there were 38 sports?
Yes. I gotta show you the book.
Okay.
And what I did is there's math associated with each sport. So I show you how numbers are a part of each and every sport. So it's a book about math without being a book about math. The other one I did was I did a book about hair. There's a lot of science. Why is our hair the way it is? What are the different chemicals? I love that my hairdresser says that she's a chemist, because when she's up there mixing colors and whatever other potions that they're putting in our hair, she has to know chemistry, the right combination for the right texture. And so I did a book about hair. I did a book about fashion. And I really enjoyed, I did a deep dive and looked at things like Fashion Fair and Ebony, and how they started their makeup line. We talk about some of the greats in fashion, textiles, and I went all the way back to African textiles. How do textiles get made? And then I took them through fashion, past, present, and future. And then I started talking about fashion and artificial intelligence, wearable technology. Where is fashion going? Even the very now, how they're using virtual runways and virtual software, AI software to even design clothes. So they're learning about technology, engineering, and math, but I did it using fashion. So each of my workbooks, I'm going to do one on cars. I'm going to do one on music. Those are in the work, but be woven throughout those is STEM.
Wow, you do a lot of, that takes a lot of work and research and to pull all that together. And you also have to have illustrators of some kind. I don't know. So do you do your illustrations, or do you hire an illustrator?
I hire an illustrator. Over the course of my books, I've had two different illustrators, and they've been with me, I think it's going on 5 years. So we started out and created the base characters, and so now we get to reuse a lot of the characters, but the whole character development on the front end, it was a labor of love, you know.
Yeah, I've worked with illustrators, so I understand what you're saying about that. So I had a question in my mind. It was about it left. I had a question as we were talking, it's gonna come back. I can't think of it right now. But I did want to find out, when you started the bookstore, how did you, like, have you done retail before? How were you able to set it up to where it made economic sense for you?
Well, I had done about 2 solid years, like I said, doing expos and traveling and exposure. I even had done trade shows, and was getting to the next level within trade shows to work with some big companies, and was looking at some of the bigger companies, how to get on the shelves of Barnes and Nobles or Target, and all the different hoops. And all of that kind of background helped me kind of know what I needed to do as far as setting up the store. Because to your point, early on, I was listening to my customers, my target market. And that's what I found out, that in some others, they were taking me through other hoops that I had to jump through. And I was like, I can go directly to the people, you know, and so I just learned a lot from the different, going to the expos and the trade shows and that type of thing. And then, you know, so just real life exposure, that was my training ground. And then God took me the rest of the way. He filled in the blanks after that.
Well, I did remember my question. It was about AI, because that's like the talk now. I don't, the AI that I've been exposed to, I am not impressed. Just the example of calling a company and going through the whole thing about them saying, I can answer simple questions, or I can respond to simple statements. No, you can't. Because when you try to talk to the machine, they take you around in a circle. It's so frustrating. And then I've seen these robots they have that supposedly are smart, but they just look creepy to me. So what do you think about it?
I think, you know, it's interesting that people are talking about it so much, because it's actually been in our world for a long time. I've been in IT for 30 years. It's been around more than 10 years. So, you know, everyone's talking about it right now, but you've been interacting with it for a while. But to the level that it's getting ready to go to, I don't think people even realize you know, that what we're talking about. And at the end of the day, on my side, what I'm always thinking, again, that's why we want to push as many of our young people out there, so that our experience, you know, we experience things differently just from our community, even our level of trust of certain things. And so we need to have our young people be a part of the designing of this AI and representation of this experience. We're not going to stop it. It's going to happen.
Right. Yeah, that's
I think
true.
it
It is.
depersonalizes a lot, to your point, you know, you talking to a machine, but it's going to come to a point, true AI is going to come to the point, you're going to have a hard time knowing the difference between when you're talking to a real person and a robot. And that's the scary part.
Yeah,
And
it would be, because right now
the
it's
machines
nowhere near
will
that.
say that again.
Oh, I said right now it's nowhere near that.
Yeah.
You know, and even when they try to make it seem like it's a real person, it's because you can't. There's some questions that you ask that are not specifically stated the way that they've been programmed to respond to it.
Right.
So when you ask the question, they never are right. It's like they're all around with the end, you know, all around it, but just not hitting it straight on. Now they might, with more information loaded into the database or whatever they load all that stuff into, it might get better. And I think actually that gives an opportunity to people who do better with being in person. Personalized service will become more important because it won't be as common. It's becoming less and less common. So if you give good service, personal service, it gives you an edge in the market.
And that you know what, that is a great point, because in reality, what that speaks to is to the small business, to the entrepreneur.
Yeah, it
That
does.
gives great businesses. Because I'll be honest, even when I started the store, people said, people aren't doing books anymore. People aren't, they're not doing that anymore. But you'll be surprised how many people are so excited to see, first of all, a bookstore that is directed, toward education. And kids are going back to the wanting to hold books in their hand. And so it's like, sometimes, like you said, it's like when new stuff comes along in technology, it actually, the old stuff comes back in style as a result of that. So I don't think bookstores are going away. And I think that, like you said, from a shopping perspective, the personal touch, having a small store, not the big box store, I get some really, really nice feedback and reviews, and that was what keeps me going.
That's true. Now, what do you have planned for the future in terms of, you talked about franchising potentially, or maybe even expanding the store that you have there in Atlanta? Are you a native of Atlanta, or you like have lived there a long time?
I've lived here a long time. I've lived here almost 27 years. I've lived here longer than I've lived anywhere else. Simply
Okay.
because my father was in the military, so we traveled around. So
Okay.
Atlanta's what I know. I actually have two other outlets. One is in the Toco Hills area. So I sell out of a store there, Westside Market. And we're also looking at a location in Roswell Road. But the other thing is we're looking at going on the road and maybe doing a mobile bookstore. So,
Okay. People have been predicting, like there's a saying about the death of so and so was overrated or exaggerated. The death of books has been grossly exaggerated, because
absolutely.
what happens is books are expanding into different forms. It's still a book, but we used to only have paper books. Now we have ebooks, we have audio books. And so it will just keep expanding. And I think there was a survey or a study. I know I used to read books on Kindle all the time. I went through that Kindle period. But then a couple of years ago, I went back to books, back to physical books, just because it's a book in your hand.
Yeah.
It's different. It's just better.
Yeah.
So we're actually a couple of minutes over our time. I wanted people to know how they can reach out to you at Espresso Bookstore or online with your items that you have.
Absolutely. So you can go to www.expressobookstore.com, and we have a actual catalog that you can flip virtually. So go see that and play with that. And then that when you're ready to order, you go to expressokids.com. So either one of those sites will get you there. And then, please, you'll see a link to sign up for our newsletter, so you'll know where we're going to be and when we're going to do different events.
Okay, and I will tell you, your catalog, online catalog, inspired me on something that I'm working on. So I saw yours and the way you had your setup, and I said, this is great. Let me just, let me set mine up in a similar way. So you inspired me. I want to let you know that. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jacqueline, for being on Black Authors Matter TV, and continued success. I think it's amazing that you have this bookstore that's focusing on STEM, and especially for children.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, have a great evening. Okay, well, we're going to bring on our next guest, but before we do have one more book to give away, and we're going to show you the book. And this person will be a guest on the show, I believe, next Tuesday. She's been on the show before. Vanessa Riley's new book is called Queen of Exiles. And this book came out very recently. I don't have the date it came out, but it's been very recently. And so this is the book, and this is an actual book, not an advanced reading copy. So Queen of Exiles by Vanessa Riley. And the question for this, to win this book, is the Queen of Exiles is Haiti's Queen Marie Louise Christopher. She was the widow of which monarch? So if you name her husband, who was a monarch, you get a copy, you get this book mailed to you. So our final guest is Larry Ukali Johnson Red, and he's joining us from California. And he will be, he's a returning guest because we had him on a few weeks ago and we had challenges getting him on screen and getting everything connected. And it just, we didn't want him to miss his interview time to let him know about his book visually. So we had him come back, and he's joining us from California. And there's his picture, and I hear some sound coming through. So welcome to Black Authors Matter TV.
Well, thank you very much, Gwen. Thank you for having me. And It's a
Okay.
pleasure to be here.
You're welcome. And you have a book, it's specifically for young people. And why don't you tell us the name of it?
Okay, my book is called Letter to My Young Brothers and Their Parents.
Okay,
And
raise it up a
so-
little bit because we couldn't see the title because the title's on the bottom. Okay,
Yes,
Letter to My Young Brothers. And it's for their parents as well.
yes, it's a family read.
Okay, and what's the target audience for the book? Are you targeting middle schoolers, high schoolers, young men out of school?
Yes, definitely K-12, because these days in America, like in the days when I grew up, Black men are being targeted. And so since we're being targeted, it's best for us to open our eyes and play the game that we got to play in school and graduate. And that's the main point in the 4 chapters, is that Black boys need to graduate, because if you don't, then you're going to have a much harder life than if you do. And so I've written this book basically in response to the study that was done by UCLA and Harvard University, and it came out in 2018. And it said that Black boys had the worst chance of success of all boys in America. And so we have to be aware that that's kind of like signaling, because it was done on a zip code basis. But the study was done on Black boys and came to the conclusion that Black boys had the worst chance of success. And of course, success is kind of tied to graduating in America. And so that's why I felt like I wanted to give the young brothers something to get out of school, and some motivation to get through school and not get stuck and go to the chain or to what you call jail, because too many brothers are ended up in jail.
Prison pipeline.
Yeah, the school to prison pipeline is full, and we need to block that off and start getting brothers to graduate more.
Okay, now some would say that they are graduating illiterate children, and that's unfortunately true in many cases. So how do we make it more than just about graduating? Because a lot of them are just being passed through from one grade to the next, and they still can't read or comprehend. They still can't calculate. So how do we?
Okay, and that's why I have this
address
book.
that?
That's how, because we have to give the young Black boys the motivation to graduate, but also the motivation to work hard and to do certain things like not cut, like to go, make sure to turn in their assignments on time. They have to write 3-paragraph essays in middle school and 5-paragraph essays in high school, each paragraph having 5 sentences, so that they can fully express themselves and what they mean to say. And this is the kind of a lead that we give in this book, and the motivation that we give in this book, that from the very beginning, 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, every parent should download the words and definition of their child's next grade and then print out the words and definitions and have those words and definitions by August 1st, so that the kid can go through those for the 15 or 16 days or 20 days it is before they can start the next year of school. So if kids go to school prepared with a whole new vocabulary, then they're going to be much more likely to be successful than if they don't. So that is definitely one of the main trips, one of the main tips that we provide in this book. And also, if the student is not motivated because they don't see Black history in school, then have them read Black history when they come home after they do their homework. But they should definitely, have a conscientious step and know the school is so serious that they cannot play around with it, they cannot cut, and they cannot get caught up in this, what you call school to prison pipeline.
And it's a real thing, because if they have data on the people who are in prison.
Yes.
And the data shows that if you don't, really by middle school, it's kind of, the die is already cast.
Well, even in third grade.
Yeah, well, and they do say 8 years old is really the tipping point. People used to think it was more like 12, but it really is 8 years old. If the person is not already on a path, it's hard. It's not impossible, but it's very difficult. And it's also 8 years old is also the cutoff for, well, I won't say cutoff. It's, if you want to raise a bilingual child, normally what they can speak 2 languages simultaneously growing up, 8 years old is the point where it becomes more difficult after 8 for them to be bilingual. So a lot of things happen up to age 8, and they need to be reading in kindergarten. That's really.
Of course, we should buy those books from the Black bookstores to show them our culture from the time they started growing up as a baby,
Yes.
And this is what prepares them for a great educational experience.
Yeah.
So this book, again, is written to reach out to the young brothers, to let them know that they're going to be targeted, but also to let them know that there's a way through it. And so in this idea of books, like the idea of looking up the words and definitions from the 1st grade to the 12th grade, I'm telling you, this is going to prepare the student when they go to school, that whatever language the teacher uses is going to involve those kinds of words and those concepts. And so they will be able to catch it better. If they would sit at home during summertime, July, August, and read the words and definitions of their next grade. The next grade might be 2nd grade. Next grade might be 10th grade. Next grade might be 11th grade. And so they go to Google and download the words and definitions, or in some cases, it could be in their school, on their school website, or on this website called Quizlet, Quizlet.com. And of course, I'm not on their payroll, but they do have excellent words and definitions. And it might be a little cost involved, but your child is worth it, so that they can be successful. And if a kid gets used to looking up the words and definitions in the 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd, 4th grade, then they know that's what they got to do. And they can continue that right on up to the 12th grade, so that when they walk in the classroom, they have that great new vocabulary, and they're able to be successful with the teacher. However, they must also turn in all of their work on time, on schedule. And that means doing your homework on time. And these are the kind of things that our Black kids sometimes miss out on. And so this is why we got to school them before they get in school. This is what to expect, and this is what you need to prepare yourself, and please be successful and graduate. That's the message we got to give to our students. Now, this book is broken into 4 chapters. So the first chapter is about elementary school and what students need to do in elementary school to graduate. And again, making graduation the highest part of the chain that the kid needs to concentrate on as soon as they leave their mother's house or their parents' house or whoever's house.
Mhm.
And then they have to look at those words and those definitions and just study them and learn them. So by the time you walk in the classroom, you know the curriculum that the teacher's going to use to teach that class. And if we can do that kind of preparation, then our kids will get through much better. Now, the most important thing too in the English classes is writing a 3-paragraph essay for middle schoolers. So middle schoolers, how do you write a 3-paragraph essay? Well, you got to have the introduction. You have to also have the center paragraph for all the details, and then the conclusion. And if you stay with 5 sentences for each paragraph, then you can use those sentences to fully express yourself. And it is so important for students to know how to express themselves or what they've read or what they see. And by having the words and definitions, they do better. Now, the high school is a 5-paragraph essay. You have to write a 5-paragraph essay. Now, how do you write a 5-paragraph essay? Well, in the book, we have an assignment to write up an essay saying that your first body paragraph would be that you're going to, what are you going to do to graduate 10th grade? And your second paragraph would be about how you intend to graduate from 11th grade. And then the third paragraph will be how are you going to graduate from 12th grade? And the book also has a lot of things for Black boys to practice. Like, if you go to the prom, don't get into any bad situation after prom, because you could be, considered a rapist or something like that. So we get just travel through all those kind of tough areas about how to graduate. And the 4th chapter is about how you graduate, or if you decide you want to drop out, then the 4th paragraph is just for you, because it's going to tell you that if you're going to go to adult school to graduate, you're going to go to the classroom tired because you would have worked already, you would have fed your family, and then you finally come to work, finally come to school, and then you almost pass out because you're so sleepy, because you're tired. And that's how rough it is in adult school. I saw bro trying to grab a wink of, sleep, this morning even. But, because I'm a teacher and I'm in the classroom, so I know how difficult it's going to be for you as a high school dropout to finally graduate. It's going to be very, very difficult. So you might as well make sure you graduate when you're in school and you have a free house to live in and you have parents at home who love you. Because everybody who love us Black boys and Black men want us to learn how to read, write, compute, as you were saying earlier, and learn science. Those are all things we're expected to know. And we can do this, but we have to get on the right ride at an early age and then practice good steady habits throughout school.
Okay, what do we do, or what do the young brothers do and their parents about 2 things that happen in the school system that are unfortunate with our children? One is that the expectations are extremely low, so they're not challenged a lot of times in classes. And a lot of when they're younger, they start giving them Ritalin and things like that. Really, they're basically zombies in class, and they're considered to be discipline problems. Now, some young people are discipline problems. So, but they also are targeted more, and they are over punished for something that another person might do that just gets a slap on the wrist or nothing, no slapper. So how do we address those, or do you address those challenges?
Yes,
too?
I do address those issues because
Okay.
I was taken out of my 5th grade class and put in a special ed class for 3 days. Now, they had no IEP on me, and you're supposed to, by law, have an IEP before you take a kid out of a regular class and put them in a special ed class. But it even happened to me, and this was a long time ago. So they've been doing this to us. And so parents need to know, without having an IEP with a principal or vice principal present and the teacher and the student, as well as them. If that doesn't happen, then their kid should not be taken out of school. And so a lot of parents don't know that. But of course, you know, and my mom, that probably the only reason she learned, bless her heart, the reason she learned was because she worked in a beauty shop. So, you know, word got out, you know. To
Now,
the
what
beauty
does
shop,
IEP stand for?
Independent Education Plan.
Okay, all right, because I wasn't
IEP.
aware of that. I never
Yes.
heard that term. But so what is the independent education plan? Is that universal? Is that everywhere? Or is it in California, or is it because you're in California?
It should be everywhere. It
Okay,
should be.
it may not be called IEP everywhere, but
Right.
I wouldn't know because I'm not an educator as far as in the.
But yeah, but the educator has to be, I mean, the IEP has to be scheduled where the parents have enough time to make sure they can make it, and
Okay.
they have to agree to it. And the kid has to be there, as well as a principal or a vice principal of a school. This is a legal law. And
Okay.
so, but even with me, like I said, it happened. And so we have to stop it from happening. And A, and then B, by building up a kid's vocabulary from the very beginning, we take that off the table, because if they learn the words in the summertime before they go back to school, and definitions of, even if they're going to go to woodshop class, they need to know the words and definitions of the woodshop class, the words and definitions of the science class, words and definitions of the math class, so and English class and history class. Now, what we could do to further motivate them is have these simple Black books that talk about Black history. When they get home, they can read them, and with this same vocabulary. So this is why we have to build this up as parents from the beginning, so that the kid doesn't go into class not knowing the words, not knowing the definitions, and failing. And that's what they have set up. So we have to make that fail, and by preparing our kids, teaching them the words and definitions for first grade, words and definitions for fifth grade. There's a list of words and definitions on the internet for every grade level up to 12. And 12 has a very special list of words, because you're getting closer to the real community and coming out of school. So it's very important to learn how to read and write, also learn how to avoid being in the independent study game, because it's a game, it's a tough game, but it's a game. And it's a target that's used mostly at Black boys, but sometimes they put them on Black girls too. But you can prevent that if you get your student able and ready to learn by knowing all the words and definitions at an early age, and knowing how to look them up, look up the words and definitions. The teacher uses new words you don't understand, then you go ahead and you know, get those words and look up the definition and fully understand them. So the understanding part is definitely a challenge for the Black boys, and we got to prepare our Black boys for the challenge so they can go in there and be successful.
Well, it's definitely a timely topic, because education is the key to really success, regardless of your profession. You need to educate yourself in the basics. And
Yes.
Unfortunately, the basics are being put to the side for things that don't even matter in many cases, things that aren't going to help children to be successful. Now, what is your background? Have you been an educator for
Yes.
your adult career? And
Yes.
what aspects of education were you involved in? Were you in the classroom? Were you in administration? Were you a principal?
I played the role. I've been a elementary school teacher at Bret Harte Elementary School in San Francisco. I've also been in principal at the Job Corps. I've been a vice principal at Liberty High School in Brentwood, California, the first African-American administrator in the history of that district. Liberty Unified High School District. So I've played all the roles, and right now I'm still in a high school diploma program at Pittsburgh Adult Education Center. So my educational ideas are based on not only those studies, but I've also been to Nigeria. I lived in Nigeria for 4 years when I graduated from USF, and I had married a Nigerian sister, and we both went to Nigeria. I stayed there 4 years, and I taught in Nigeria. I taught government to high school students. And some of my high school students have come to America since they graduated from Benin City. And on Facebook, they write me and say, hey, thank you, teacher. You know, so they appreciated me. And so I was in Nigeria for 4 years. So I've had a unique educational experience, but I also have a master's in administration and a master's in school administration. So I have, you know, 2 master's degrees. And so, but I've simplified things so that I can reach out my hand to my younger brothers and say, follow this path and graduate and be successful. And that's what I have done with this book.
Yeah, I've found just anecdotally, I've observed a lot of Nigerians that come here, their children do very well in our public schools. They graduate higher than American Black students in many cases. It's all about the emphasis at home. It means it's 90% of it, I'll say. If the educational emphasis at home, if you have parents at home who believe education is important, then it'll be important to you, the student. But if you don't have that, you either have to have some kind of self-motivation. Some people are special where they're self-motivated, or sometimes they'll have a teacher that really is in their corner and they're able to do it then.
True. And this book will give that same kind of foundation to a student and can be received. But now, where do you get the book? You know, you have to go to, I'm still working with Amazon. They have a hard time getting back in touch with people. So, but definitely Barnes and Nobles. And there's a bookstore here in Pittsburgh, California, called Railroad Book Depot. So you can go to certain, and then there's Creative Books. So there's 3 different stores in the Antioch area, but that's a small area. We have a long way to go to get to everybody with our marketing. However, if you get a book like this and read the book with the kid, read the book with the young brother, he can understand why you want him to learn the words and definitions better then. Because once he learns those words and definitions, he's out of the flow for special ed.
Right. And that special ed is part of the school to prison pipeline. Now, I have one final question because we're getting closer to the end of the show. What do you think about these concepts where people are saying that knowing certain things is white, like knowing math is white?
Right. So we got to discourage that.
It's crazy.
Yes.
But how do you succeed if you think everything that makes you succeed is white? How do you do that?
And when the kid comes home, you show him some Black history books, and that's going to tell him that whether if he learns how to read, he can read white books or Black books or any other kind of books. So you definitely have a reason as a parent to show your son the words and definitions. If he's in the 1st grade, then you get that from Quizlet or from Google. If he's in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and even when he gets to high school, he still needs to keep himself up to date on the words and definitions so that when he does go to school, he doesn't have a problem understanding where the teacher's coming from because he doesn't have the vocabulary. If you can eliminate that stuff from the beginning, then I think you have the kid on the way to being successful.
Okay, so you're basically saying that if they need to see more people that look like them utilizing these concepts, and then because some people don't have the ability to see themselves in a situation if they don't see someone that looks like them in the situation.
And the way they see someone who looks like, because even in my book, I tell them you can be a doctor, you can be, you can be anything you really want to be. And that is the truth. A Black boy can be anything he wants to be in America, as long as he studies right and gets himself prepared. So I'm of the opinion that you give the tools to a young Black boy, and he will show you what the tools can do.
Okay, well, Larry, we're at the very end of our time and the end of the show, but we're glad we were able to bring you back so we could have you on camera to talk about your book. Show it to us one more time before we sign off. It's
Definitely.
a letter to my young
brothers and their parents. And that is on the second page, yes. But definitely it takes a team, the parent and the son, and it takes the work. And the work is teaching the young brother who's 6 years old all the words he needs for first grade, second grade. And then if the brother is 14 or 15, teaching him all the words that are further up the chain, so that he will be in a position to graduate. And that's what we want our Black boys to do.
We're at 9 o'clock, so we need to sign off. Thank you so much, Larry, and continued success to you.
And thank you so much for having me back.
Okay.
You have a nice day.
You too.
Okay.
Well, everybody, that's the end of this week's show. We'll be back next Tuesday at 7 p.m. Central Time, 8 p.m. Eastern for Black Authors Matter TV. I'm Gwen Richardson signing off, and my co-host will be here next week. Good night.
Thank you for tuning in, and join us next Tuesday at 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern for another edition of Black Authors Matter TV.